Hello everyone, and welcome to Pui's Pantry. I'm your host, Chef Pui, and today we're going to be looking at my recipe for Mystic Wok Chicken Stir Fry. This simple and delicious dish features a secret ingredient that's really sure to wow your Go Format friends. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you want more videos like this, and without further ado, let's get cooking. For this dish, you're going to need 2 whole chicken breasts cubed, 1 chopped bell pepper, 3 stalks of chopped bok choy, 1 to 2 tablespoons of ginger, 1 to 2 tablespoons of garlic, 2 chopped stalks of green onion, 2 tablespoons of cornstarch and 2 tablespoons of water, some sesame oil, and 1 playset of Mystic Wok. Any condition or printing will do, but I find that copies stolen from a Chaos Turbo player's sideboard really bring out that salty flavor. I already pre-prepped the other ingredients, but I figured I should show you how to properly prepare your Mystic Woks for consumption. For starters, you'll need to use clean hands to shred them into bite-sized pieces. Don't be afraid to have fun with it. Once that's all good and done, we're gonna need to wash them off. So in a small bowl, run the pieces over a little bit of water. And lastly, place them in a blender with a little bit of water to puree for about 30 seconds. And strain. Now we're ready to go. With your wok on high, add a layer of sesame oil to the bottom of the wok. After about 30 seconds, add your ginger, garlic, and scallions. Begin to stir lightly. Once fragrant, add your chicken and continue to stir. After about a minute, add your bok choy. Then 30 seconds later, add your peppers. Continue stirring until the chicken is cooked on all sides. Once that's done, add your secret ingredient, stir it in, and cover for about a minute. Lastly, uncover and stir in your cornstarch. Make sure to stir the cornstarch before mixing it into the dish. Add some salt, pepper, or soy sauce to taste, and you're done. Serve over rice, add another wok as a garnish, and you're good to go. Great work, guys! Now there's only one thing left to do. Hello everyone, it is Pui. I am back again today to talk about the deck that I am supposedly once and future queen of. Here it is. We are back on the Panda Burn. We are here to talk today about the state of Panda. And specifically, we are not talking about this list, but we are talking about Panda Burn post-Worlds, what happened, where the deck's gone. There's so many things that's happened. If you're paying attention, it's hard to keep track of everything, but here to help me navigate today is none other than my beautiful burn boy, Birdman. Say hello, Birdman.
Hey everybody, it's me, Birdman.
Do you want to tell the people about yourself?
Yeah, I have been playing Yu-Gi-Oh! For like a real long time, even though I don't seem like it, but for most of it, it was just with like 1 or 2 of my buddies. But this year specifically, I started to actually like interact with people because people helped me see that there was a GOAT community. Been a pretty dope year of doing tournaments pretty much like every week or every couple of weeks.
Dope indeed. If you don't know Birdman yet, you're about to. This guy came onto the scene this year, like you said. He has played basically nothing but Panda Burn. He has topped multiple Patreon WCQs. He regularly takes down folks such as SDL Killa and AJTBLS. He is, in my opinion, the inheritor of the state of Panda Burn, so I thought there was no better person to talk about this deck with than he. We're going to look at his lists later, but for now, what we're going to do is take a little trip down memory lane, if you will, at this season in terms of Panda Burn tops. We'll look at a bunch of top 8s from a bunch of different players throughout the year, starting right after the Worlds 2021 win by Delinquent, and leading up to GFC 18, which is the most recent tournament at the time of the recording. You'd think that the list starts to look more refined as it goes. You'd be wrong. Things get only more and more progressively crazy, and there's a whole lot to unpack. So are you ready, Birdman?
Yep, definitely ready.
Okay, we're going to start off with Filtro Fiore's Panda Burn. This was in FLC 22. This was basically the first thing to happen in the season. This was the first list that was mating Cylinder once again, if I'm not mistaken. This was also a list maining Nightwear Wheel, which is something that Delink had been doing. It was also playing the Desk Koala. The sideboard is absolutely nuts.
There's 3 Book of Moons for control, which I respect. There's 2 ciphers in the side. This man is playing Barrel Behind the Door. He's not even playing the Golden Gun version, which makes me thoroughly upset.
Yeah, it's just a normal, regular gun.
It's just normal gun.
Yeah, just normal gun. I like a lot of stuff about this deck. I know that we're kind of off of it at this point in time, but I do think that playing Preem and Call is like really solid paired with the 3 Panda. It just adds a lot of synergy. Like whenever you do happen to finally get your trio or your burn, you just know that you're going to have some beefy guys behind it if you have all this revival. Paired with the Trunade too. I know that the Trunade never really happens because you try to do the Trunade into Preem to like double Preem, and it always just gets hit by like MST or Book of Moon or etc. But it just like the option of revival in general, I think people were prioritizing early on in the year, and now we kind of don't care, understandably.
I absolutely agree. I specifically think that the Call and Prima plan very much assumes that your Ojamas are going to stay on the field, which
Exactly.
we both know that is the crux of things
Yes.
here.
This is almost pre-Mystic Walk is how the deck looks, and sort of like when you look at a lot of these options, they directly lose to a deck that is siding Mystic Walk. Like,
so you bring up a very good point that we did not talk about yet, which is part of this legacy, part of this chronicle we need to discuss is how players were actually siding against Panda Burn. Because after Worlds,
yes.
it's very clear this deck was some kind of real, and people started experimenting. By FLC 22, top players were using 2 copies of Mystic Walk in their sides. Mobius was not as common in Turbo. It was quite common in Warrior. Wanghu was not common yet, but this was still the point where no one had figured out how to beat Mystic Walk. People in my Burn World server, we were kind of all freaking out. Everyone had come to me separate. They'd all run into the card and were like, how do you beat it? And I was like, this can't be that good. We'll figure it out. But this deck right here came from an event where it's very likely Feltro could have gone his whole day without seeing Mystic Walk. I agree with you. Spell Canceller, not an answer to Mystic Walk at all. I think that was for stuff like Reasoning Gate and Empty Jar. But yes, I think that this is a deck that could wreck shop in a world without Mystic Walks everywhere. But that was not the world we lived in. By the next tournament we're going to see, things got more and more common with the walk. And so I went to the lab, and my teammate KL provided me a list that I ended up working with, and we developed this. This was my list in the 3v3. We got 3rd place as a squad of me, Don't Copy, and Chopper. And about a week later, or a couple weeks later, I used basically the same list to get 7th place in FLC 23. So we're going to take a look at this list here. This is, to my recollection, the first topping list that decided to go with a beatdown side. This was the way that we decided to get past the Mystic Walk. This is something that KL had done similar to in Worlds, but I was bringing my own sauce to it by going really hard on the mind control, hard on the knock, and I was also going with the Royal Decree. For Warriors, I had the 3 copies of Nightmare Wheel, and I also, in this board, had the Mobius. I was also using Gravekeeper Spy in both of these lists. In the second one, I ended up adding Cypher Soldier as well, but we were very on the idea of Gravekeeper Spy, allowing the more aggressive sort of approach to work in both matchups and both versions of the deck, especially when you mind control Spy against Chaos Turbo. But Birdman, what do you think about this deck when you look at it now?
If Filtro's deck and your deck sort of met in the middle, you would get something more similar to what will start working later on in the year. Not that this didn't work, but this list that I'm looking at here, this looks a lot tighter. Like a lot of the things I was about to say, you actually adjusted in between events. This is like, it has a lot of your personality in it, in my opinion. Like, you really don't like Nightmare Wheel, so you sort of relegated all 3 to the side because at the time it was still like so good that you should be playing 3 somewhere in your deck. I would say that's not necessarily true anymore. If you were to do a list similar to this now, I doubt that you would have 3 will in your side, maybe like 2 or 1 in your side, or just like 1 in your main, and that's it. But there are some things that are really interesting about it that I really like. Again, I am a big fan of Premature Burial in Panda Burn just because we're sort of tight on guys. It makes more use of the tribe that you're maining. The tribe, I don't really understand it, but like, again, when I put myself back at that time, I do understand it. Like, you got the mind cons, so you're already dealing with the sets really well in your main and then in your side too. So having the tribe is just like mounting a little bit of extra pressure. You were doing the 2 panda thing, everyone else was doing the 3 panda thing, and I think part of why this worked is
Oh
it
yeah,
definitely
this was the first 2 panda thing, wasn't it?
this is very you, the whole list. You got the 2 koala, the 2 panda, right? The 2 spy. So you're trying to hit them with like an aggro wall. So you didn't really feel like you needed the panda. And like you were just describing, like in your world, you're fighting Mystic Walk here. And so you're just assuming that the trio don't really stick. And if it does, it's just to get off a little bit of burn. And even if you attempt that, it might just get decreed because we're just getting like hated on basically at this period of time. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like I like what you're doing in here, like when I'm thinking about it in reference, because I think that's what helped you break into like a top 8, like was the variance from what people were expecting you to do.
As for what I think about this deck, I look back at this and I cringe a little, but I understand my heart was in the right place. Gravekeeper Spy was an honest try, but Gravekeeper Spy, this is 2 more monsters than like the deck even needs at all, which we'll get to later. But it was
Yeah.
kind of awful to be drawing hands of like rat, spy, panda, cipher, and just like I have 1 move per turn, and they keep getting removed by the warrior players. Speaking of warriors, you see the wheel on the side. We'll
Yeah.
talk more about this later too, but I did not like this card in any matchup against warrior, but I was completely convinced that this card just solved the warrior matchup if you played 3. Play 3 of this, you play your cipher. I had spies as extra defense. It was really, really hard for me to lose to warrior at the time. Things have changed, but
Yeah.
this was really tight against warrior.
Warrior players have gotten a lot better at this matchup. Just for starters, like they were
No
a little
doubt.
bit clueless early on in the year,
Mm-hmm.
and would sort of like beat face into rats and into spies, which is why you have your deck built like this. Because if they're not hitting with a swordsman, it's really not going to do shit. Like, and even if it is a swordsman, they're sort of leaving themselves open a bit. So it's like the way that they were trying to approach the matchup was not working, and I think now there's a lot more nuance to every panda matchup. But you know, we can get into that later.
Okay, moving on now, we're going to look at, I believe, FLC 24. Yes, for a very interesting pair of very unique Panda Burns. They are Return Winner in 4th place and Matt Uber in 2nd place.
Nice.
So much to unpack here. These lists are wildly different. One thing they hold in common, and one trend that had really, really caught on by now. 14 monsters, 13 monsters. No more 16s, certainly no more 17s. Monster counts are lower now.
Yeah, these lists are like hella tight, not even gonna lie. One thing that I didn't like about your list and just comparing those to these was that I don't think we're playing Gravity Bind. Maybe you were playing 1 in your list from the 3v3, but you were playing none in the like the list that you got 7th in. I mean, it's understandable because I feel like people are starting to turn off of Gravity Bind once again, like right now, actively. But I still don't know how I feel about it. Like, I think it's a pretty consistent card for the deck and has usually proven itself to help people's performances. So, like, it's in Return Winners list. Is it also in Matt Uber's list?
Let's take a look. Yes, 2 binds in Matt
Yeah,
Uber's list as
we're
well.
both on 2 binds, and you were on none. I mean, doing the none can do well, but I do think that Gravity Bind overall boosts the deck quite a bit.
Yeah, so to comment on that a bit, there was definitely a long period of time where I was no Gravity Bind pilled because I thought the card was too easy to destroy. One of the first reactions people had to Panda Burn was just a massive increase in like dust tornadoes. Everyone was just like everything. You had to expect everything was getting end phase dust tornadoed, and so in the end, Gravity Bind sort of went into this zone for me of like the same as Nightmare Wheel and Magic Cylinder. It was like, why am I setting more cards than I have to? Why would I ever set a non-chainable or a card who needs to stay on the field? And something that I've learned, I think of it similar to knock and flip monsters, which is you either play none or you play a ton. If you want to play a bunch of spells, you play like all of them. You see here, Return Winner has his Nightmare Wheel, his Cylinder, and his 2 Gravity Binds. Matt Uber, 2 wheels, Cylinder, 2 Gravity Bind. You also have the Ceasefire. You have the swords. You have everything. They can't destroy them all.
Definitely agreed. I think the maining Kaiku in Return Winners list is really interesting. I have not really attempted that at all recently, but I do think this is like this has to be the first list with the 3 Trunade in the main, right? The return winner list.
I
And then Matt
believe
Uber
so.
did it soon after. Oh, I see. At the same exact event.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it does explain a lot to both of their lists. Like Matt Uber's not going to be maining Mystic Swordsman in this deck without maining 3 Trunade. His side reminds me quite a bit of your side, actually, from the previous list. It's
Yeah,
just
I
like,
think it was very much inspired by that.
yeah, but it's like in my opinion, a much more powerful version
Yes.
because it's really tight, right? Like I can't really say what it's missing. I would like 3 Decree, but what's your thinking? Because you did 2 Decree too.
I just don't think he had space for a third decree. But talking about the
Oh,
decree, I think it absolutely works. I think the last thing Turbo is expecting a trap-based burn deck to do is to also play decree. But we just also have Trunade to bounce them, so it works. If you really think about it, you can break Chaos Turbo down into flip monsters, trap cards, chaos monsters. If you look at certainly like return winners list, you're trying to attack those axes. So return winners pre because he has the nobleman and he has the kaiku over here, and then Uber is doing a similar thing, but he's doing it in the side here where
yes.
he has the decree. He also has the mind controls. He's not playing knock, which is interesting, but he also has the cocky, which actually can trade with BLS, which is pretty great, as well as mind control to trade with BLS. You have the Mystic Swordsman to deal with the face downs, which is just good in a lot of matchups. Panda Burn started to realize that it needed to find tools to attack these angles, and you see that in both of these lists. And then also we see this uptick in more traps, less monsters.
Yeah, more traps, less monsters, and just more floodgates in general than the list that you were seeing early on in those January tournaments. Because, like you were saying, if you have so many, then eventually one of them's going to stick. And any of them sticking is much more problematic than like any other card in this format. If we can create that scenario in any way possible, like by setting all of these reactionary cards like Just Desert, Secret Barrel first, then the floodgates become even more powerful combined with one another. The other thing is like Trunade is just this crazy monster of a card in my opinion.
So
like
good.
it just has insane utility. Like I get why you would only play 2 in some lists, and the lists that play 2 are still really tight. But 3 Trunade is just so good in Panda specifically because it will force out any reactionary trap immediately from your opponent because they don't want it to get back bounced to their hand. They want to get their field cleared so that they don't get hit with as much burn next turn. Well, the first level of it is you're forcing a reaction. The second level of it is that cards like Dust Tornado sort of lose their relevance because they're constantly down tempo. Like, if depending on the scenario, of course, like if you're dropping a Trunade and you have a field full of floodgates, it's not really too potent of a move. But if you're dropping a Trunade in a game state where you don't have back row, like they're kind of just fucked, in my opinion. And that's what adds a lot to both of these decks. I think that they had this in mind, and that's why they had so many traps as well, on top of the 3 Trunade, on top of these aggro monsters. I don't understand what Karibo and T-Roar are really doing here, just in my opinion. I'm not trying to rag on this list. It's a great list, great player, etc. It's just like everyone is really funny how they just throw in their own spice, and sometimes it just does literally nothing in that deck. But it's like, hell yeah.
Hell yeah, yeehaw. So anyway,
Yeah,
I'd say,
right.
tell me if you agree, but our takeaways here, we got lower monster counts, more Trunade good, more floodgates good, beat
Yep.
down sides, try to attack Turbo's angles as you can.
Yes, I would say that is exactly what they're attempting. That and the traps that they're choosing to main, like if you look at this Uber list, he's very prepared for Warrior, despite only having the one Cypher in his main.
Ultimately, though, with things like the one cocky, the engine, and the spell canceller, there's a lot of expressiveness, and I don't think we can really talk about expressiveness without talking about this thing.
Oh, so true.
This thing right here. So, for starters, let's get the elephant in the room out of the way. Behind the shadows, we had a bunch of people independently, quietly working to see if this card right here was any good. And the answer was yes. Yes, yes, yes. 1,000 times yes. This card is very good. Welcome to Chain Energy. You have to pay 500 life points every time you want to do something. Who do you think that favors?
It's like a super interesting card, Chain Energy. When I had first started playing online more, I played with someone named Nova quite a bit, who was a huge believer in chain energy, saying like if you're going to play the card at all, you should be playing it at 3 in the main. I think that that's a pretty like common belief in the community now, which is interesting that someone was talking about it all the way back then. I sort of questioned it, and I still do. Like I like this 2 chain energy, 2 true nade, like sort of like a little tightly knit monster kit. Like I like a lot of stuff about this list. It's just really a lot of strange decisions that were clearly just to set people off guard. Like 2 rat, 3 panda doesn't make any sense to me. 1 G-bind, 1 wheel is strange, but I get that it's sort of like to meet in the middle between the 2 cards, like, and what they're doing. But in that case, like, why not just side one of these knocks?
I kind of
At
like
the same
the wheel
time,
being a half a knock, half a G bind.
I like it, but the point to it, in my opinion, at that point, is to just do what these people were doing right before in the lists a week earlier and just maining 2 wheel. Like that's what you're saying, right? It's a little bit of knock and it's a little bit of battle trap, so it's like all you need is a little bit of knock. You know, you're just trying to stall for time and then set up your stuff.
There's a lot of kooky shit going on in this deck because it was piloted by Alethea too. I
Yeah.
think a lot of it was just him trying to have a good time and maybe putting out feelers for things that could be good. I'm not even sure he tested any of these cards out with anyone besides maybe his brother. But indeed, Chain Energy continued to prove itself strong. Here we are with Alvarado, the lowest monster count we've seen so far, and 3 Chain Energy. No wheels, interesting, but he has the full 4 Trunade and Heavy. He's got 3 Chain Energy and 12 monsters. Only 2 pandas. He's maining Tribe. This list got 4th at a PWCQ. This
Like,
list still surprises me.
I know I'm biased for the aggro lists, and you can sort of tell as this is going that I'm a bit biased at the aggro list, but I love this list too. Because Alvarado came in with the chain energy with a totally different mindset than a lot of us. You play it as a burn card. It allows you to extend your burn. But the way that he's playing it in this deck, it's sort of like, this is really close to like a control burn, because he's maining the Mirror Force, he's maining the TT, he's maining 3 Trunade and a Heavy, right? He's got the Tribe, and he only has the 2 Panda, just like your list back in January. And I think the point to all of that is because he's not really attempting the burn, and then his side obviously proves that that's what he's going for. He's got a DD Warrior Lady, a Breaker, 2 BrainCon, 3 Mobius, and the triple Solemn, all to just sort of beat face game 2 while still playing Chain Energy. Like, just to sort of be like, no one was really prepared for the card quite yet because it had been like maybe 2 weeks after the event.
People
that
still thought Alethea was just doing another kooky Alethea thing.
He was doing this weird shit, and
the Burn
so
players
good.
knew it was not the last time we were going to see the card.
Yes, we knew, no one else knew. And so when Alvarado was playing it with a deck that's completely, this is like Chain Energy Burn more than it is Panda Burn. I think the 3 Mobius is great. You see a lot of people playing at least 2 nowadays. I think it's one of the most popular Panda side cards and cards to fight Panda, actually, which is hilarious.
This is when we are fully in the Mobius age.
Yeah, we're in the Mobius era, right? Because a Monarch deck just topped a really big tournament.
We'll talk about really that just too.
Mobius time. Yeah, we'll get there.
I think that the BrainCon Mobius and the Knock are a really powerful trinity. I think this might be one of the best aggro packages that we ended up seeing, going all the way from, my thing up to Matt Uber's zombies, and now we just have I'm going to summon Mobius. And don't forget, a lot of people are in this matchup citing Dust Tornadoes and Sakus, so this card just says, hi, irrelevant. I take your monster, I destroy your sets that you can't chain, and I'm now going to hit you in the face. You can't do anything about it, and you also weren't expecting it to be this efficient. You weren't expecting me to have this many Mobii, and you weren't expecting it to be backed up by Solemn. What do you think about Solemn? I'm still very on the fence about this.
No, the Solemn's insane. The Solemn's really good. That's, again, why this feels like a control list, because the whole point is he's the only one playing with Mobius or with really, like, board wipes at all. He's got all these floodgates that you have to address. You cannot leave a Chain Energy alone. You have to address it. So eventually, he doesn't have to play the Solemn at first. eventually he's just got the solemn, like the scenario that we were describing earlier, where like you stack floodgate on floodgate in order to make it so that not all of them can
Chain
be
energy
topped.
makes it so much worse.
So much worse. And then the solemn on top of that, they're obligated to out the chain energies. So eventually they are in a scenario where they're just stuck under a gravity bind that is never going away. And if anything ever threatens it, it's getting solemned. And when I messaged Alvarado about this list, that's actually what he was telling me is the solemn isn't even for heavy. It's just for Mobius. That's kind of what I really like about this list. Like it's sort of next level in its thinking. And it does branch away from the main strategy of the deck in a lot of ways. He's super, super just good at the game, so it's hard with some of these lists, again, with these people that are really good at the game, like Alefiet or Alvarado. It's like, how much of this can I implement for a long period of time and have it still work?
Yep.
What I like about this list is he's really backing up the plan. Like, you can tell, unlike the Alefiet list, where it's like you were saying, awesome but very scattered, and it just worked because he is also awesome. This list, in my opinion at least, it backs itself up really well. Like it stands on its own 2 feet, even probably today, with people knowing what it looks like.
I think that is something huge we need to touch on, and I think it's probably time to touch on it. What is the state of Panda Burn? In my opinion, the state of Panda Burn is that this is simply just a tier deck. And I know this sounds like it should be obvious, but I think a lot of folks are still framing it wrong in their head. I think a lot of folks for a long time were looking for a way to just shut this deck out in one card because it's a burn deck and it's an alt-win deck because its neutral game relies on playing a trio and jamming the board, and its end game relies on dealing a bunch of burn damage. And that feels like you should be able to block it in like one card. And people went through card after card and did not find it. And people are going top after top with the deck, and it looks different every time. As different as one Chaos Turbo looks from the other, as different from one Goat Control looks at the other. Because the reality is, the cards in this deck are just good. They aren't going away. Get used to it.
I think the Panda list specifically, and maybe this is, again, some Panda bias, but I think they're debatably the most different looking lists. Like, we're never really getting standard sides, like, from these players whatsoever. And we're not really getting a standard main at this point. Like, all that is, like, 100% guaranteed when you're fighting a Panda Burn deck is the trap lineup. That is more or less the same, like 12 cards, and then they can add on a few if they would like to. But I think that the spell trap lineup and the monster lineup changes quite a bit every single week that you're fighting a Panda Burn deck, and the side is constantly changing as well, depending on what they're attempting to anticipate or just try out, you know?
Indeed. This is one of the hardest decks in the format, not in its execution, because once you get the cards in your hand, if you know how to do some basic math and you know a couple of basic rules, usually the list makes sense if you built it. But you cannot bring the same Panda Burn to an event twice and expect to do well. You are not Ivan Rosito with his Chaos Turbo here. You need to have an intimate understanding of what you're expecting in the field, how you want to build the main to handle that, and how you want to build the side. Because the deck can be aggressive, it can be controlling, it can even kind of take on mid-range, but not really. You have to be very aggressive, very controlling. You have to understand what flex slots you want to use how and what tools. You want to understand how much removal you're expecting. You want to understand if it's going to be majority chaos or warrior. You want to be expecting if you have to play against extra decks. You have to time the aggression very well in the side. Sometimes you can't do the aggression. How much space do you have for the aggression? What does the aggression even look like? Because it hasn't looked the same in any of these decks. You need to have such a good understanding of what everyone else is doing just to make it work. And they also need to have a good understanding of what this deck is doing, because after all this, that first list I showed you will still kill anyone at a local.
I mean, in regards to like the state of the deck, I would definitely say Panda Burn has not reached its full potential. Despite it being in this precarious situation where like we're constantly topping, but we're constantly having to innovate to continue topping, I do think that it has a certain level of consistency to it that can't really be preed for in any way. Like, and I think that we're just starting to hit that point because of the lists that we saw at Worlds, the multiple different burn lists that did really well at Worlds. But maybe that's just my perspective from someone that is mostly playing this year. Like the world's lists seem very relevant. Maybe there are some old burn lists that we haven't really looked at that look a lot like this with the chain energy, etc. Some older players that I talk to are like, yeah, chain energy is just a good card. We just know that. And I'm like, okay, well, I didn't freaking know that.
I did not. I mean, there was tax burn, right? You were playing chain energy with toll and like other
Yeah,
cards. That's not.
yeah.
This
But
is
that's
something
not the
different. And
exactly.
maybe that existed, and maybe people knew about it. But this deck has a way of being strange and novel
Hmm.
because people just pushed the format even harder.
Well, my theory about the deck is that there are two like fundamentally different ways to approach it, other than the aspect of your siding. Like you, obviously, siding is a meta specific thing, but even when you like get down to the core of the deck, when you're looking at this list that we're looking at right now, like you can either approach it as this high roll combo deck that needs to get its combo off to win, and as soon as it gets its combo off, it guarantees in some manner that it will win, or you're going to make this like deck that sort of in this strange way resembles Warrior, like how we were saying that Chain Energy is sort of like a trap dust shoot like card.
Oh, we
Like
need to talk about that.
You establish it on the board first, and it's just like the tempo is different from then on. True Nate is also offsetting the tempo in a very similar way, and paired with Chain Energy, it's just horrible to beat down. Like Panda Burn is actually incredibly good in a simplified game state if you build the deck a certain way. And if you build it the other way, it's really good at getting its combo off. Like fundamentally your main deck can look different and still be called Panda Burn.
No doubt. I, in my original Panda Burn video, basically put like 2 pandas and 3 Ojama trios as what I consider to be the only core cards in the entire deck, basically. And
Yep.
I think that still stands because we haven't even talked about 2222 Broken. I think I couldn't find his list, but his is playing 10 monsters, and his is playing Wave Motion Cannon, and it's playing Solemn Main, and it's playing Magic Jammer because he's basically just playing like Stall Burn, but with a Panda engine. And then we also have the decks that are playing Sunlight, like Alderso was playing a Sunlight Panda Burn with a transforming side, and
Yeah.
there was the whole Bastard Burn experiment. I'll talk about that someday. But there were people who were just trying to get off these broken flip effects over and over
Yeah.
again. In the end, I'll say that while Turbo is optimizing by somehow playing less real cards and just drawing them more often, Panda has realized that they have so many good cards to choose from that they have a hard time picking 55, and only the smart people pick the right 55. But also, sometimes something crazy happens and something completely out of left field, and we need to talk about Meru now.
Yep.
This deck.
It's so interesting.
I don't know what to make of this.
I think that a lot of things about this list are super duper smart and very well prepared for what he was expecting to see that day. The Big Shield Gardna we have seen in lists prior. They just weren't like eye topping. There was the Kotsos V list where you had 2 Big Shield Gardna. I think it pairs really well with the level limit area B, obviously. But also, if there were Chain Energy in this list, I think Big Shield Gardna pairs pretty well with that card as well.
Yes.
Since it takes 2 cards to out a Gardna. No one single card is going to out a Gardna, so it's like quite a pain. Like you can't just Mind Con it or knock it. You can't just beat over it typically. There's very few cards in the whole format that are just going to beat over a Gardna in defense mode. So it takes minimum 2 cards to out the Gardna, which is minimum 1,000 damage under Chain Energy. A lot of stuff like that starts to add up. Things that I like about this list, the Mystic Walk. I've been thinking about this for quite a while in Panda Burn, and I do think that playing Death Wombat Mystic Walk is not just good against Panda Burn, it's just like a universally good side tech that you could be playing.
You want to play Mystic Walk against other decks?
Like, yes, honestly, so think about it. Gardna has a 2,600 base defense stat.
Okay, I'm already convinced.
You're already convinced, right? It makes perfect sense what this person is doing.
Wait, so they attack into the Big Shield, it turns into attack, they attack again, you chain Mystic Walk.
Exactly.
That's
They're just
so dumb.
minusing over and over, trying to fight through all of this bullshit, like I was describing. And I think that the deck is built that way. Like the cylinder's there for that reason. The two wheels, the two G bind, the two area B, are all there for that same reason. This list is pretty solid. It's really strong versus Burn. I fought this with my own Burn deck and lost. The Nox and the Minecon combined are pretty potent in the matchup. The Mystic Walk makes it impossible to lock them, which is typically what you're going for in the Panda Mirror, is establishing trio and then just sitting until you can burn them out. There's a lot that's really solid about this. The Reapers allow control in the
The
mirror.
Reaper was so good. I'm
Mobius,
sorry. I gotta talk about the Reaper for a second, because I was
Reaper's
actually
so
head
good.
judge and I was streaming the top 8. When I first tried Reaper, it was in Worlds before I switched to Stein last turn, and I didn't find success with it because the builds weren't right. But you have the big shield
Yeah,
Gardener here to eat the Nox. The Reaper was so
exactly.
good.
That's why the garden
He
is
put
good.
the Reaper in attack twice in top 8,
Uh-huh.
and both times he won those games doing it. And I was like, what is going on? I'm so confused. This card
Hmm.
has been a better floodgate than any floodgate I could possibly imagine.
Uh-huh.
It's been 10 turns or something. The Goats was stupid good. The Magic Drain is actually really good against Turbo. You should just consider playing Magic Drain against Turbo, actually. If you're watching this, just try it. I think it might be good in a lot of these builds because they don't really
Uh-huh.
want to discard their spells at
Oh,
all.
we have to talk about this level 4 Earth guy that's
Oh,
in the
yes.
side as
Oh,
well.
yes. This
Insane
card.
versus Turbo. Insane.
Yeah, this is
Protector of the
Protector of
Sanctuary. Crazy card. 1900, very relevant. Solid wall. Just another thing that's going to be a huge pain to get over, and you have to get your engines going because you can't use your Graceful, you can't use your Pot of Greed, can't use your Upstarts, your Jars. You can't do anything if you're playing Turbo, basically, until you out this 1900 defense monster, which is very difficult to do without that draw engine. So I don't know why I wasn't already playing this. That card's incredible. You can search it off a Giant Rat. It's pretty ridiculous.
What are your main takeaways from the Chronicle of what we've seen?
Once again, like the way I feel is very optimistic about the deck, which is why I continue to play it at every single event without really deviating in any way. I think that Panda has not reached its full potential. I don't think it's even close. I think that it's an S tier deck, but that it shares the tier with several other decks that are all capable of winning events and possibly like being the dominant force in the meta. Obviously, people are preying for the deck for a reason. They don't want it to hit that point where a deck that they don't like to see is an S tier deck. But I think it's eventually going to reach the point where it's undeniable that it is, because at every single event from here on out, you'll see at least one Panda player topping. That's just how it's been since the middle of the year this year. You're constantly getting Pandas topping the Friday local, you're getting them at the Grand Prix, you're getting them at the Patreons. Like, I've topped 5 of the Patreons, and we've had several Pandas get second, or at least be in the grand finals of a lot of these events consistently all year. Almost as much representation as Warrior and Turbo. I think more representation than Goat Control. Although
No
Goat
doubt
Control is
more representation than Goat or Chaos Control. This deck
yeah,
completely
yeah.
has taken up their space. It hasn't pushed them out per se, but it took up their
No,
space.
yeah, but it can get even bigger than this. I think we haven't perfected the deck whatsoever. I think obviously there are different lines that you can go down, like with the whole hat thing, but that's a different video. You have a video on that. Um, but like even just with the deck the way that it is, like just Panda Burn, there's a lot that we can still work on. And there's a lot of testing that people have not seen. Obviously, you and I know this. Things that people will slowly begin to see from the deck, like this Princess of Sarugi stuff, which is going to be pretty awesome with the Death Koala.
We'll talk about this in a sec, for sure. Yeah, so my takes on things. I think Chain Energy's good. I think True Nade's good with Chain Energy. I think Garden is good. I think Meru's list, if anything, is a showcase of just more good cards to play with Panda. I think that
Mystic
the
Walk,
deck has so many powerful cards to choose from that we're literally struggling to figure out which ones we want to use. People have pushed it in all sorts of different directions, and my big takeaway today is this is a deck you can solo. I think
Yes.
people don't think about this. They try to treat it as a side hustle. They think it's something
Yeah.
that noobs are picking up, where those same noobs would be picking up Reasoning Gate before. This is a deck that you can solo. This is a deck you can put time into. You can learn metagames, and you can make reads accordingly. You can do something extremely powerful with it in any event if you do the right cards with it. Just like a turbo, just like a warrior list, just like a control deck, you can find the cards. You can make it right. I think Alethea, too, said himself after beating Meru and after having gotten second with this deck himself, that he thinks a well-prepared Panda is probably the best deck in GOAT.
Exactly. It's true. If you're prepared for well, it's tough to say because you can make that argument again for any S tier deck. Like a well-prepared warrior list is going to shit on every other deck that day, and we've seen that multiple times this year. It just happens sometimes. Like a well-prepared turbo list mathematically should win every time because it's going to draw its combo every single. You know what I mean? Like you can say that about several decks, but I think what's interesting is the validity to being able to say it about Panda Burn, like with the consistent results that we're seeing and the variance in the lists with those results. Like, I don't think we're seeing a lot of 3-wheel lists. I don't think we saw many since Worlds, right? Just for example.
Yeah.
There's like a lot of tech that changes constantly, but like at the end of the day, just useful cards in general.
Absolutely. In any case, you compare it to other top tier decks, and I think we can very handedly say this is a top tier deck. This deck is yet to have another first place finish since Delinquent at Worlds, but it's due for one. It's absolutely due for one.
We have been robbed several times.
We have been robbed 7 times, but we have to become the robber. If you think you have what it takes to be the Panda, the new Panda Queen, the new Burn Queen, the new Burn King, you should give it a shot. I say play no more than 15 monsters, play plenty of true nades. You're going to want to check out the sides, do something aggressive, but don't use the full 15 cards on it. Try Chain Energy, 2 or 3 in the main or 3 in the side. Treat it like Trap Dust Shoot. If you think that Trap Dust Shoot is worthwhile to play in a main, then play your Chain Energy's main because it's going to feel the same. I think it's worth trying your wheel. I think it's worth trying cylinder, but I think it's only worth trying these things if you're going to play a lot of them at once, because you want to have to put stress on their Mobius, put stress on their Dust Tornado. If you only have a couple of them, then they'll get destroyed and you'll be down bad. But I think there's a lot of directions you can take it. Take this advice with you. Be well, and I hope you have a lovely day.
Mm-hmm.